I never thought I'd be the kind of person who believed in love at first sight. I always figured that was something people made up for movies or romance novels, something that didn't happen to regular guys like me. But then I met Theo, and everything I thought I knew about myself got turned completely upside down. It started last spring when I took a job at Riverside Equestrian Centre. I'd just graduated college with a degree in environmental science and absolutely no idea what to do with my life. My friend mentioned they were hiring stable hands for the summer, and I thought, why not? I'd never been around horses before, but I needed the money, and honestly, I needed to figure out what I was doing with myself. The job seemed like a good way to clear my head and maybe get some direction. My first day, I showed up early, nervous as hell, wearing jeans and boots I'd bought specifically for this job. The stable manager, Richard, was this weathered guy in his 50s with kind eyes and hands that looked like they'd been working with horses his entire life. He showed me around the property, explaining the routines, introducing me to the horses. I was trying to take it all in, mentally cataloguing names and feeding schedules, when someone called out from across the yard. Richard turned and waved, and I followed his gaze. That's when I saw Theo for the first time. He was walking toward us leading this massive chestnut mare, and I swear the morning light hit him in a way that made my breath catch. He had dark hair that fell across his forehead, sun-bronzed skin, and these eyes that were somewhere between green and gold. He wore a faded blue t-shirt that showed off lean, muscular arms, and he moved with this easy confidence that immediately made me feel clumsy and out of place. Richard introduced us. Theo, this is Adrian. He's starting today. Adrian, this is my son Theo. He knows these horses better than anyone. Theo smiled at me, and I felt something shift in my chest that I'd never felt before. His handshake was firm and warm, and when our eyes met, I had to look away because something about his gaze made me feel completely exposed. Nice to meet you, he said. His voice was deeper than I expected, with this gentle quality that matched the way he handled the horse beside him. Don't worry, we'll get you comfortable around these guys in no time. I managed to mumble something back, but honestly, I was barely functioning. What was wrong with me? I'd met plenty of good-looking people before. This shouldn't have been different, but it was. Those first few weeks, I told myself I was just admiring Theo's skill with the horses. He had this incredible way with them, this patience and intuition that was mesmerizing to watch. He'd approach even the most nervous horse with calm assurance, speaking in low tones, and they'd settle under his touch like he had some kind of magic. I found myself watching him constantly, studying the way he moved, the way he'd brush hair out of his eyes, the way he'd laugh when one of the horses nuzzled his shoulder looking for treats. I'd never questioned my sexuality before. I'd dated women in college, had a girlfriend for most of junior year. It had been fine, pleasant even. But there was always something missing that I couldn't quite name. Standing in that stable, watching Theo gentle a skittish gelding with his hands and voice, I started to understand what that missing piece had been. I wasn't just admiring his skill. I was drawn to him in a way that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. We started spending more time together as he taught me the ropes. He'd show me how to properly groom the horses, how to clean their hooves, how to read their body language. Every accidental touch felt electric. When his hand would brush mine as he handed me a brush or adjusted my grip on the lead rope, I'd feel this jolt go through me. I started living for those moments of contact, however brief and innocent they were. One afternoon, about a month into the job, we were in the tack room organizing bridles and saddles. The space was small, and we kept bumping into each other, and I was hyper-aware of every time our shoulders touched or our arms brushed. Theo was telling me some story about a horse show he'd competed in as a teenager. and I was trying to focus on his words instead of the way his lips moved when he talked, or how the afternoon light coming through the window illuminated the side of his face. He turned suddenly and caught me staring. Our eyes locked, and for a moment neither of us moved. I felt my face flush hot with embarrassment, certain he could read every thought I'd been having. But instead of calling me out or looking uncomfortable, something shifted in his expression. His gaze dropped to my mouth for just a fraction of a second before he cleared his throat and turned back to the saddle he'd been working on. "Did you get that?" he asked, his voice slightly rougher than before. I had absolutely no idea what he'd just said. After that, I noticed changes in the way Theo acted around me. He'd find excuses to touch me, adjusting my posture when I was mounting a horse, his hands on my waist or shoulder, lingering just a moment longer than necessary. He'd stand closer to me than he needed to when we were working together. Sometimes I'd look up and find him watching me, with an expression I couldn't quite read, something intense and searching that made my heart race. I spent my nights lying awake, trying to make sense of what I was feeling. I'd pull out my phone and start typing questions into the search bar. How do you know if you're attracted to men? Can you be straight and still have feelings for a guy? Signs you might be bisexual. I'd read articles and forum posts from other people describing their experiences, and I'd see myself in their words. The confusion, the fear, the excitement. The sense that something fundamental was shifting inside me and I couldn't stop it, even if I wanted to. The thing was, I didn't want to stop it. Being around Theo made me feel more alive than I'd ever felt. Every day at the stable felt charged with possibility. I'd wake up excited to go to work, my stomach fluttering with anticipation at the thought of seeing him. I found myself putting extra effort into how I looked, wearing shirts that fit better, making sure my hair looked decent. I'd never cared about that stuff before. But now I wanted Theo to notice me, the way I noticed everything about him. One evening we were the last two at the stable, finishing up the evening feeding. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, and the horses were calm and quiet in their stalls. Theo was filling water buckets, and I was distributing hay, and we worked in comfortable silence. When we finished, instead of heading out immediately, Theo suggested we sit for a bit on the bench outside the main barn. We sat there watching the sunset, our shoulders almost touching, and I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. The air smelled like hay and horses and summer evening, and I felt this overwhelming sense of contentment mixed with nervous energy. Theo started talking about his plans for the future, how he wanted to eventually take over running the stable from his father, maybe expand the training program. I listened to the passion in his voice and found myself wanting to be part of that future, whatever form it took. Then he asked me about my plans, and I found myself being more honest than I'd intended. I told him I'd been drifting since graduation, feeling lost, not sure what I wanted or who I was supposed to be. I told him this job had been the first thing in a long time that felt right, that made me want to get up in the morning. I didn't say it was because of him, but I think we both knew. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. You know, Adrian, sometimes the things we're looking for aren't things at all. Sometimes they're people. Sometimes they're experiences that help us figure out who we really are. His voice was soft, careful, like he was testing the waters. I turned to look at him and found him already watching me, with those gold-green eyes that seemed to see right through me. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. I wanted to say something profound, something that would convey everything I'd been feeling. But all I could manage was a whispered, "Yeah, I think you're right." We sat there in the gathering darkness, the space between us feeling charged with all the things we weren't quite saying yet. and I knew with absolute certainty that my life had just split into before and after this moment. The next few days were torture. Every interaction felt loaded with meaning. Every look, every touch, every word seemed to carry a subtext I was desperately trying to decode. I kept replaying that conversation on the bench, analyzing every word, trying to figure out if Theo had been saying what I thought he was saying. Did he feel what I was feeling? Was I reading too much into everything? The uncertainty was driving me crazy, but I was too scared to push for clarity in case I was wrong and ruined everything. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Saturday morning, and the stable was quieter than usual. Richard had gone into town for supplies, and most of the regular riders weren't coming until afternoon. Theo found me mucking out stalls and asked if I wanted to take a break. "There's something I want to show you," he said, and there was something in his expression that made my pulse quicken. I followed him down to the far end of the property where they kept the more experienced horses. He stopped in front of a stall housing the most beautiful horse I'd seen at the stable. This was Apollo, a massive black stallion with an intelligent gleam in his dark eyes. "He's my dad's pride and joy," Theo said, reaching up to stroke the horse's nose. "He doesn't let just anyone ride him. Apollo's temperamental, requires an experienced hand. But he's also the best horse we have, the smoothest ride you'll ever experience." Theo turned to me with a small smile. "I think you're ready to try riding him." My eyes widened. "Me? Theo? I've only been riding for a couple months. I'm barely comfortable on the training horses." But he was already getting Apollo's tack, that confident smile still on his face. "I trust you," he said simply, "and I'll be right there with you. Besides, my dad's not here to say no, and sometimes you have to take chances on things that scare you." There was a weight to his words that had nothing to do with horses, and we both knew it. He helped me tack up Apollo, his hands guiding mine through the process. The horse was patient with me, seeming to sense my nervousness. When it was time to mount, Theo gave me a leg up and I settled into the saddle, my hands shaking slightly as I gathered the reins. Theo mounted his own horse, the chestnut mare I'd seen him with that first day, and led us out to the main riding trail that wound through the property and into the woods beyond. For the first few minutes, I was too focused on controlling Apollo to think about anything else. But as I relaxed into the rhythm of his gait, as I felt the power and grace of this magnificent animal beneath me, I understood why Theo had wanted me to experience this. We rode side by side through dappled sunlight filtering through the trees, and Theo started talking. He told me about growing up at the stable, about his mother who died when he was 12, about how the horses had helped him through that grief. He talked about feeling different from other kids his age, about struggling to figure out where he fit in the world. His voice was quiet and honest, and I realized he was sharing pieces of himself he didn't show most people. Then he said something that made my breath stop. "I've never brought anyone else out here to ride Apollo. I've never wanted to share this with anyone the way I want to share it with you." We'd stopped in a small clearing, and he turned his horse to face mine. His eyes were intense, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen before. "Adrian, I need to know if I'm reading this wrong. If I'm seeing something that isn't there, because for weeks now, I've been feeling something I've never felt before, and it's driving me crazy, not knowing if you feel it too." My heart was racing so fast I felt dizzy. This was it, the moment where I had to choose between honesty and safety. I could play dumb, pretend I didn't know what he meant, keep everything safely in the realm of friendship and co-workers. Or I could be brave. I could take the same kind of chance he was taking by putting his feelings out there. "You're not reading it wrong," I said, my voice shaking. "I've been feeling it too." I've never felt this way about anyone before, especially not another guy. And it's terrifying and confusing, and also the most real thing I've ever experienced. I couldn't stop the words once they started. I think about you constantly. I look for excuses to be near you. Every time you touch me, even accidentally, it feels like electricity. I don't fully understand what this means or what I am, but I know that what I feel for you is real. The relief and joy that flooded Theo's face was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. He dismounted quickly, and I did the same, my legs shaky as my feet hit the ground. We stood there facing each other with our horses grazing peacefully nearby, and the air between us felt thick with anticipation. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and I nodded because I didn't trust my voice anymore. When his lips touched mine, it was like everything in the world clicked into place. This was what had been missing from every other kiss, every other relationship. This sense of rightness, of coming home to something I didn't even know I'd been searching for. His hand came up to cup my face, gentle and sure, and I leaned into the touch, into him, into this new understanding of myself. We kissed in that clearing for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, learning the shape of each other's mouths, the taste of each other's lips. When we finally pulled apart, we were both breathing hard, and Theo rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since the day we met," he whispered. "Me too," I said, even though I hadn't let myself consciously acknowledge it until much later. I think some part of me knew from the beginning. We rode back to the stable slowly, our horses walking side by side, and we talked about everything. Theo told me he'd known he was gay since high school, that he'd come out to his dad a few years ago and been met with love and acceptance. I told him about my confusion, my late-night internet searches, my fear of what this all meant. He listened without judgment, his hand occasionally reaching over to squeeze mine, and assured me there was no rush to label anything, that I could take all the time I needed to figure things out. What mattered, he said, was how we felt about each other. And I felt more for him than I'd ever felt for anyone. That much was crystal clear. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of secret touches and stolen kisses, of learning each other in the quiet moments between tasks at the stable. We kept things private at first, not hiding exactly, but taking time to exist in our own bubble before letting the outside world in. Every day I fell more deeply for him, and every day I became more certain of who I was and what I wanted. Richard figured it out before we told him, of course. He cornered me one day when Theo was out on a trail ride and said, with a knowing smile, that he'd never seen his son happier, and he appreciated me being good to him. It was his way of giving his blessing, and the acceptance in his eyes made something tight in my chest finally loosen. I called my parents that night and came out to them. It was terrifying and awkward and not perfect, but they told me they loved me no matter what, and that was enough for now. I knew some people in my life might not understand, might pull away, but I also knew that living authentically, loving Theo openly, was worth any cost. Now, 6 months later, I'm still at the stable. I've enrolled in an equine management program because it turns out I love this work, love these animals, love the life Theo and I are building together. We've moved into a small apartment above the stable office, and I wake up every morning with him beside me, sunlight streaming through the windows, and I feel grateful for that day I took a chance on a job I knew nothing about. Sometimes I think about that first morning, seeing Theo walking toward me with that mare, the way something in me recognized something in him, even before my conscious mind caught up. Sometimes I think about that ride on Apollo, the way Theo trusted me with something precious, the way that trust extended to trusting me with his heart. And sometimes I think about how close I came to never knowing this kind of love because I was too scared to acknowledge what I was feeling. The stable master's son let me ride his father's best horse, but more than that, he let me be myself. He gave me the space and safety to discover parts of myself I didn't know existed. He showed me that love isn't about gender or labels or meeting other people's expectations. It's about finding someone who sees you completely and chooses you anyway. It's about being brave enough to choose them back. I'm still figuring things out. I've started identifying as bisexual, though I know that might evolve as I continue learning about myself. I've connected with LGBTQ+ communities online and in person, finding support and understanding from people who've walked similar paths. And through it all, Theo's been beside me, patient and loving, reminding me that there's no right way to do this, no timeline I need to follow. What I know for certain is this: I love him. I love the way he hums while he works, the way he talks to the horses like they're his closest friends, the way he looks at me like I'm something precious. I love building a life with him, planning our future, dreaming about the stable we'll run together someday. I love who I am when I'm with him, and I love who I'm becoming because of him. That first day at Riverside Equestrian Centre, I thought I was just taking a summer job to clear my head and earn some money. I had no idea I was about to meet the person who would change everything, who would help me understand myself in ways I never had before. I had no idea that a stable master's son with gold-green eyes and gentle hands would become my whole world. But that's the thing about love, isn't it? It finds you when you're not looking, in places you never expected. It challenges everything you thought you knew about yourself and asks if you're brave enough to grow. And if you're lucky, if you're very lucky, you find someone who makes that growth feel less like losing yourself and more like finally becoming who you were always meant to be. I'm one of the lucky ones, and every day I choose to be brave enough to love him.